Auburn loses to Missouri 23-17, and Hugh Freeze's seat could not be any hotter.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, filling in for Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining us from Jordan-Hare Stadium, we're recording this on Saturday night after Auburn's dropped their game to Missouri 23-17, is Montgomery radio legend Daryl Dapprich. And Dap, this was a really ugly game from the perspective of Auburn had a lot of opportunities to avoid going to overtime in general. And then in overtime, they had opportunities to win the game and couldn't get positive yardage. When you listen to Hugh Freeze talk about this game, was it anything different from what we've heard about this team being close and needing to find ways to win?
No, it was the exact same, verbiage, the exact same message. I think the game felt different, Lindsey. Mm-hmm. I think when Auburn was able to score in the second half and take a 17-10 lead, even though you knew it should have been 23-10 and that they left points on the table, it just felt different. I felt like, okay, Auburn was going to win this football game. We're against Georgia, against Texas A&M, against Oklahoma. I didn't feel that way. I really believed that Auburn's defense, as well as they were playing, that a touchdown lead was going to be enough. I also felt even after, Missouri tied it up, that Auburn had a really good chance to go down and they hit a couple big plays and had an opportunity, I felt like, to take the lead. Felt like it was going to happen, where other times I didn't. But at the end of the day, it was kind of the same things that have plagued Auburn in a close game, where you look around the nation today and subpar teams with losing records, teams that have had things happen to them, found a way to make plays and win the game. Teams like Florida, heck, Arkansas almost won. Mm-hmm. Kentucky gets to overtime against – the bottom feeders, and yet Auburn, here they are, with more talent than any of those teams, holds on to the ball too long, takes sacks. Now, I will say this, I know we're getting tired of talking about the officiating, but the non-pass interference call on Cam Coleman was brutal. It would have set Auburn up inside of the red zone with a chance to take the lead. Mm-hmm. They dropped what would have been a first down, in my opinion. Preston Howard would have been a big play, got him in the red zone right after that pass interference. But again, same song, different verse. They still can't find ways to overcome bad things that happen to them. And I think that starts from the top. And I think that you've got to be able to overcome adversity. And this team has shown absolutely zero ability to do that.
Yeah, I've got thoughts on everything you said. But on the Cam Coleman thing, and Zach and I were watching the game together in the streaming room waiting for the game to end so we could go live last night and talk about it. I feel like Cam Coleman's not helping himself in these situations because he never just runs the route. He gets into the route, but he's initiating contact with the defender, and he's starting that whole process. And I feel like there are some officials out there, right or wrong, who will see something like that, and they're just going to let the kids play. And so there's a little bit of jostling either way, or when something like a pass interference happens, sometimes they look at that as, hey, there was hands on both sides. I'm just going to let it play. We're just going to move on to the next play. And so that's like, I have very, very little criticism of Cam Coleman. I think he's one of the most talented receivers Auburn's ever had on campus. But that is something that I think he doesn't help himself in those situations because he's initiating contact with these defenders. But there was something in the press conference, and I want to get your thoughts on this because we saw it all over social media after it happened, that Hugh was considering a quarterback change, but he determined that a lot of the offensive issues were not because of Jackson Arnold. Did it feel like, one, I was just shocked he even bothered to say that, right? If you're not going to make the change, don't talk about making the change because it has all the negative effects of the change without the positive effect. But did it really feel like in this game, unlike a lot of the others, that one of the main issues on offense was not Jackson Arnold holding the ball too long and taking sacks? Like, I do think, he played better in the second half than we've seen recently, but it still felt like, and you said it earlier, he was just holding the ball way too long and not getting the ball to the playmakers. And that felt like that was part of the issue.
Well, I asked the question. I got the first question, and I asked – Jackson Arnold was not at the press conference, first of all, which is the first time that's happened all year, where he was not there sitting next to Hugh. Mm-hmm. And John Cohen wasn't there at the beginning of the press conference either. He came in later. But I asked the question, I said all the way back to fall practice, there's a viral video of you throwing your visor upset with Jackson holding on to the ball too long. And I know that's just practice, but here we are 7 games in the season and he's doing that still. Is it a problem? And what do you do to fix it? And he admitted it was a problem. He said he's holding on to the ball too long, but he said that it's not just him that's plaguing the offense, that the offensive line, but he did say there were a lot of receivers running open, wide open receivers that he missed because he was holding on to the ball too long. And then he also said to remedy that problem, they will look at everything on Monday, all the tape, and decide if that conversation needs to be had to change quarterbacks. He said that part of the problem is Jackson Arnold. He did admit that. Missed assignments, missed blocks, that kind of thing too. He also drops. Yeah, there were some dropsies tonight, a lot of dropsies. So
Cam had 2, and Preston Howard the tight end continues to get targeted and not be able to make the play. I said this last night on the postgame show, but it was really odd to me that you have such talented wide receivers and you still continue to make the tight end such a big part of the game plan when the person that was obviously not there. I want to bring in somebody else real quick. Our buddy Zach Blackerby coming to us from an undisclosed location in a hotel up in New England. I know has thoughts on this game and wants to hear from you as well, Daryl, as far as the press conference and some of what Hugh Freeze talked about, the issues with the offense.
Yeah, Daryl, one question I have before we head to our break here. What did Hugh's demeanor seem any different? Did this seem like a guy who feels like he was about to get fired?
He looked, every time you lose games like this, you walk in defeated.
Right.
The other times he looked a little bit more like, I don't know, angry or frustrated, right? Like maybe that he felt like one got taken away from him. Body language to me this time did look a little bit defeated, and he started to justify certain things. When we came here, we didn't have the talent. I think we've done a lot of talent. I think God wants me to be here leading this young man. There was a lot of verbiage like that wasn't in the previous 3. This is where I'm supposed to be, that kind of thing. So I don't know. Again, I did not see, as I mentioned earlier, there was some conflicting things. John Cohen was not at that press conference for a large portion of it. He did arrive later, but Jackson Arnold was not there as well. He was not. This is the first time Jackson wasn't in the press conference, which was good because it would have been awkward for Freeze to talk about a quarterback change and all that with him there. Yeah, there seemed to be a different vibe with him. There was a lot of reflection and justification, I guess is the only way I could put it, as to why. Because somebody asked the question, the fans deserve better. What makes you think you and your staff can turn it around? And that's when he went into kind of defending his merits.
Yeah. All right. In just a second, I want to get into some of the other issues that we saw in this game. Obviously, the kicker stuff, things like that. We'll do that next, right here on Locked On Auburn. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. As much as I want to tell you about the lines for this matchup this weekend with Arkansas, instead, we're going to look at basketball because Auburn is plus 4,000 to win the national championship this year on FanDuel. And listen, the first season without Bruce Pearl, if Stephen Pearl takes a brand new squad, one that looked a little bit flawed on Wednesday, to the national championship, I think there won't be a single person who can question the coaching change about Bruce Pearl stepping down and his son being given the job. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at QO. It's one of the tools that makes a huge difference for business owners is QO, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system we've talked about. I'm sure Daryl uses this a ton at his business. Listen, the point here is when you miss a call, you are leaving money on the table. Think about the last time you called the plumber. If your plumber didn't answer, did you just wait and call them back later? No, because when you call the plumber, it's a pretty bad situation. You just go to the next number on the list. QO is the number one business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works through an app on your phone or your computer. You don't have to carry two phones. You don't have to rely on a landline. So go see why 90,000 businesses trust QO, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at QO.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you have existing numbers with another service, QO will port them over at no extra charge because QO is no missed calls, no missed customers. Welcome back to Locked On Auburn. Lindsey Crosby, Daryl Dapprich, and Zach Blackerby joining us from the hotel. And Dap, one of the big things I really want to know about, because the end of the day, obviously you didn't perform offensively in overtime and all of that, but you had two opportunities to kick what could have been the game-winning field goal in regulation, and Alex McPherson missed them. I think it was 44 and 38 yards. And then you turned around and sent him out in overtime for a 50-yarder. Did Hugh talk about the decision to use Alex McPherson in that spot over anybody else? And what did he say about why they did that? Because from here, doesn't feel like it makes a ton of sense.
Well, he said he should have used Connor on the 50-yarder. He went back and said, hindsight, he should have used him. And the reason why he didn't is because Alex had been making 50-yarders in practice the last 2 weeks.
Practice?
Yes, practice.
Not a game. Not a game. We're talking about practice.
He said, I should have used Connor. And again, I mean,
come on. Like, what are we doing?
But I will say this too. I'm just as frustrated. I'm not trying to pile on the kid, but you got to make the 38 freaking yard field goal too. And you won't go into overtime. I'm tired of that. Yeah. I'm tired of saying our kickers need to make field goals. And I understand all the health problems he's been. But that is a makeable kick, and other teams are making kicks, and Auburn's not making kicks except the Missouri kid in overtime. But so, yeah, I mean, that's bad. But after you see him miss a 38 and a 44-yarder, why, for the love of God, would you send him out there to kick a 50-yarder?
You know, Zach said this to me when we were watching the game last night, that it really felt like when Auburn went into overtime, they didn't have a plan. And I think that's a great example of Hugh just said, hey, we're going to get close enough to kick a field goal. We'll send Alex out there and he'll make it. And there was no reconsideration of the fact that, hey, we went backwards, not forwards. And we're going to send out a kicker who didn't make two that were shorter than this. This kick would have been both wide and it was short. He didn't clank this off the upright. This thing didn't make it to the back of the end zone. Just incredibly frustrating there. Any sort of other big takeaways, Dap, that you have from the presser, or things that you want to make sure that we hear from you what Hugh Freeze said after this game?
Yeah, I mean, he talked a lot about how hard it's going to be. I mean, he was very honest about it. He's to get this team's morale up, but that they're playing at Arkansas, that they deserve better, that they've played so hard, played their guts out, and that this team obviously has the talent to not lose games like this. But I mean, when you say stuff like that, that's kind of a self-indictment. I want to say this too. He never says anything about the defensive side of the ball other than how well they've played, right?
Yeah.
And they did play really well. Mm-hmm. But I will also say that in overtime, and they've made plays most of the night, but again, there is a little bit of a bugaboo on 3rd and long, and I don't have a stat in front of me that shows that, but on 3rd and 11 in overtime, you've got to make that stop and make them kick the field goal, and they didn't, and they ended up getting a touchdown, and then that was the death knell for Auburn. So it sounds like a really crappy thing to say when your defense has been keeping you in it every game. I get it. They have. But, that old phrase, one more stop. And they do have a little bit of a tendency. They do really well on 2nd down, on 3rd down, to give up some 3rd and longs. And it happened tonight. And again, it was probably in the most inopportune times to do it. Now, at one point during this game, Missouri had 12 more minutes of time of possession and had run 9 more plays. And so your defense is going to wear down when that happens.
Yeah. Zach, any final thoughts as we, I guess, anticipate, possibly a move in the next couple hours with Auburn coaching here?
Yeah. I mean, the players deserve better. The fan base deserves better. Like, Auburn administration.
I'm getting asked. And Zach, you may know this, but I don't. I'm getting asked by somebody in the media. I'm not going to say who. If I, after the press conference, saw Freeze outside the media room, and I don't know the significance of that, but I was wondering if you had gotten anything on that, Zach, too. Maybe somebody dropped, and I've asked, well, what's the significance? Drop the nugget. But there's something about that why I was asked that question. I don't know why. I don't know what it was, but
I haven't really seen anything. I haven't looked either, to be fair.
But I got asked, did you see him? So I don't know whether he was upset. I don't know the connotation of that. I just find that interesting.
This may get back to your point too about how the tenor was a little bit different in the press conference. There's a stat here about Hugh Freeze is now, after today or after last night's loss, the 3rd coach since 1948, the 3rd Auburn coach to have a losing record in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Earl Brown was 1-3-1. Brian Harsin was 6-7, and now Hugh Freeze is 9-10. And it feels like once it hits that point, it's really hard to come back from that. And I think it's possible that may be some of what you're being asked about. But either way, we will find out. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe. You can follow Dap on social media at Dap6410. He's got plenty of nuggets coming from the press conference. Zach is hopefully not going to have to do a live show from the stands of Gillette Stadium. We'll see what happens, but we'll talk to you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.